They were American commandos, the elite forces of the toughest men who fought on the battlefields of World War II. These men went where others wouldn't dare. They operated behind enemy lines, having no limits. They were the U.S. Army Rangers, the best the military had to offer. This is a story of one of their battalions, a special unit of heroes who pulled off the most daring mission of World War II. The story of Ranger battalions begins in the early years of World War II in the United Kingdom. It was the time when Axis powers were at the zenith of their power, firmly holding vast territories across Europe and Asia. In response to unfavorable war conditions, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill proposed the formation of small elite forces that could strike quickly and disrupt enemy operations in occupied Europe. Thus, the commandos were born. The idea was met with delight by American General George Marshall, who decided to create similar units for the American armed forces. He ordered Colonel Lucian Truscott to go to England and learn the trade from the British. With support from the commandos, Truscott created a plan for forming a similar unit in the U.S. Army. He gathered volunteers from American divisions stationed in Northern Ireland, primarily the 34th Infantry and the 1st Armored. The soldiers were called Rangers, a name inspired by colonial-era ranger units of frontier soldiers skilled in scouting, reconnaissance, and guerrilla warfare. The first Rangers saw their first action during the North African campaign in November of 1942, notably in the Battle of Al-Guatar, Tunisia, where they earned recognition for their effectiveness in direct assaults and reconnaissance. This prompted the formation of another 5 battalions, all of which were formed from volunteers organized into a unit except for the 6th Ranger Battalion. The story of how the 6th Rangers came to be is a rather awkward one, as its members, before they became elite soldiers, were artillerymen. The 98th Field Artillery Battalion, to whom they belonged, was stationed in Camp Carson, Colorado. It comprised 1,000 men trained in operating 75mm howitzers. Apart from guns, the unit was equipped with a prize asset of 800 mules. When the war started, the unit was prepared for the overseas debarkation to Australia. However, the Australian government refused to allow the mules to enter the country due to a law forbidding the importation of foreign animals. The unit was therefore rerouted to New Guinea. The 98th Field Artillery Battalion arrived on the island in February 1943 and spent the entire year solely in training. There simply was no action for a mule pack artillery unit, which was obsolete by all standards of modern military. In April 1944, General Douglas MacArthur and 6th Army Commander General Walter Kruger got an idea to transform the unit into a battalion trained to conduct hit-and-run raids deep behind enemy lines, a Ranger unit. The task was given to 33-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Henry A. Mucci, who in April 1944 took command of the battalion. The first thing Mucci did upon arriving at Port Moresby was to assemble all his men. After staring at them silently for a few minutes, he addressed them. "I'm going to turn you men into Rangers. From this point on, we will be known as the 6th Ranger Battalion." He then explained to them what that meant. They were to undergo a hellish 6 weeks of training, after which they would become part of the roughest, toughest outfit in the Pacific. At least those who survived it. Anyone not willing to go through all that was free to go. After these threatening words, Mucci bought the affection of his men by promising them a regular beer ration. "If you're old enough to fight and maybe die for your country, then you're old enough to drink beer," Mucci pointed out. The 6th Ranger Battalion's strength was designed to be around 750 men. The unit was divided into companies, each consisting of 65 men. Like all Rangers, Mucci's men were trained for swift hit-and-run raids, which was why they had no heavy equipment. Each company was equipped with 32 M1 Garand rifles, 12 M1 carbines, and 10 M1A1 Thompson submachine guns. If there was a need for it, the Rangers used bazookas to combat tanks and other armored vehicles. As Mucci had promised, the training was nothing short of hell, made even worse by the unforgiving heat of New Guinea. The training consisted of 25-mile hikes over rugged terrain, map reading, handling rubber rafts, marksmanship, and learning all sorts of ways how to kill the enemy silently and efficiently. Mucci went as far as to organize rough hand-to-hand combat sessions, which very often ended in bloody noses and broken bones. In these first days, Rangers resented their commander because he always shouted at them to try to do more and try harder. However, for one thing, men gained enormous respect for Mucci. Wherever they went, he was there as well, whether they marched in the scorching sun or practiced charges against machine gun nests. Very soon, Mucci and his warriors developed a deep affection for each other. It was one of the things that made the Rangers a special unit. The 6th Ranger Battalion had completed its training just in time for the invasion of the Philippines. The D-Day for the invasion of the island of Leyte was set for October 20th, 1944, but the Rangers were supposed to jump into action 3 days earlier. Their task was to land and clear 3 islands near Leyte: Dinagat, Homonhon, and Suluan. These islands were believed to hold Japanese radar and artillery positions that could threaten the main invasion force. On October 17th, the first group, comprising Able and Charlie companies, landed on Dinagat Island's Black Beach 1 without opposition. After securing the beachhead, the rest of the forces landed on the island and moved inland to clear an area known as Desolation Point. The task was performed without significant problems, after which the Rangers returned to the beachhead. That same day, Dog Company landed at Black Beach 3 on Suluan Island. They too encountered no opposition and moved inland along a coastal trail. As they advanced, the scouts came under fire from Japanese troops. During the firefight, Scout Darwin C. Zufall was killed, making him the first victim of the 6th Ranger Battalion in the war. Despite bad weather, the Rangers managed to locate the radar installation and destroyed it. By noon, they were already back on Black Beach 3. However, during the return, the company was hit by a severe typhoon, which damaged their landing craft and cut the communication with the commanding vessel. After spending the night within the defensive perimeter, the Rangers encountered another group of Japanese soldiers who were eliminated. The last landing force, Baker Company, landed on Homonhon on October 19th with a significant delay caused by strong winds on the previous day. Here, too, the Rangers found no opposition. What's more, they learned from the local population that there were no Japanese troops on the island. Still, the company swept the island to make sure the area was safe. A key part of their mission was the establishment of a navigational light at Colasi Point to guide the main invasion fleet through the channel between Homonhon and Dinagat. One platoon was left to guard the light as it was critical for the safe passage of the U.S. forces. On October 19th, Baker Company raised the American flag on Homonhon, making them the first returning American forces to hoist the Stars and Stripes over Philippine soil. On October 27th, after they made sure Homonhon was safe, Baker Company B moved towards Suluan. They used sailboats and canoes to cross the 8-mile stretch of water. Halfway toward the island, the company was caught by a sudden storm. It overturned 7 of the canoes, causing the Rangers to lose much of their equipment and return to Homonhon. 2 days later, the company made another attempt to cross the Suluan. This time they reached the island, where they set up a defensive perimeter. As they moved inland, they destroyed an enemy encampment with radio equipment, poisoned the Japanese water supply, and scouted the area. They learned that the main Japanese force on the island had fortified inside the lighthouse on the island's southern end. The lighthouse was situated on a high cliff and was difficult to approach. Not for the Rangers, though. A group of soldiers led by Captain Simmons climbed the cliff at night, while others prepared to attack from below. They muffled their movements by wearing socks over their boots. Upon reaching the top, they launched a surprise attack, quickly overwhelming the Japanese with gunfire and grenades. In a desperate attempt to escape, some Japanese soldiers jumped off the cliff. By morning, the Rangers had secured the lighthouse, eliminated all Japanese forces, and destroyed the structure to prevent further use. Baker Company continued to patrol Suluan, eliminating small groups of Japanese soldiers until leaving the island November 13, 1944. The battalion rejoined on the island of Leyte, near the town of Tacloban. On Leyte, the battalion was involved in patrolling the island until the order came through to prepare for the invasion of Luzon. On January 9, 1945, the U.S. 6th Army launched its assault on Luzon by landing at the Lingayen Gulf. The following day, the 6th Ranger Battalion landed on the island. Their initial mission was to secure Santiago Island to prevent Japanese forces from using it to outflank the main invasion force. For most of the month, the Rangers saw no action at all. Then came the order for a daring mission that would forever etch the 6th Ranger Battalion's name into the annals of military history. The mission the Rangers were entrusted with was of utmost importance. It involved hundreds of American prisoners of war in the Cabanatuan prison camp near Manila. Many of these prisoners were survivors of the notorious Bataan Death March, who for the past 3 years had endured unimaginable suffering in the camp. General MacArthur, in charge of the invasion of the Philippines, set their deliverance as a priority, especially after the massacre of 150 American POWs in the Palawan camp. On January 26th, 6th Army Commander General Walter Kruger assigned his intelligence officer, Colonel Horton White, to organize the rescue mission. Recognizing the demands of such an operation, Colonel White saw Colonel Henry Mucci and the 6th Ranger Battalion as the clear choice. For the task, Mucci chose Captain Robert Prince's Charlie Company, reinforced by the 2nd Platoon of the Fox Company, to raid the camp. Anticipating enemy armored vehicles, the Rangers borrowed a couple of bazookas to deal with them. They arrived at the town of Guimba on January 27th, where they met the rest of the raid force. This included 2 teams of the most experienced scouts from the Alamo Scouts, 6th Army's elite reconnaissance unit, and 2 squadrons of the Philippine guerrillas. All in all, some 450 men. The force was carefully picked. In order to complete the operation successfully, detailed enemy intelligence was essential. This was why Alamo Scouts were chosen. They needed only a day to scope out the area before the Rangers' march. Philippine guerrillas were important because of their knowledge of the terrain and as a crucial connection to the local population. An interesting asset to the force was a small detachment from the Combat Photo Unit F, 832nd Signal Service Battalion, whose task was to document the raid on the camp. The plan was simple yet very risky. The raid force was supposed to sneak through 30 miles of hostile territory and launch a surprise attack on the prison camp. Mucci saw 2 potential problems in this plan. The first was concern over Japanese reinforcement that could come to aid. To prevent any such situation, absolute discretion was needed. Only a few people knew about this mission, reducing the leakage of information to a minimum. The second problem was that the Rangers had to cross through a couple of hundred yards of barren land to reach the vicinity of the camp. For this reason, Mucci decided to launch the operation at 1945, just a quarter of an hour before sunset. To make a distraction and allow the Rangers to approach, Colonel White organized a low-altitude flight by P-61 Black Widow aircraft over the camp. After final preparations, Mucci rallied his men. He urged them to prioritize protecting the prisoners. The Rangers traveled light with minimal supplies, relying on local villagers for food and water. They carried essential weapons and communication gear, including long-range radios. As they set out, each man knew the mission's high stakes but was determined to bring the prisoners to safety. As the vanguard of the raid force, the Alamo Scouts began their 24-mile march through rough terrain at night. After navigating past Japanese forces in the area, they reached the village of Balancari at dawn, where they joined a guerrilla squadron led by Captain Pajota. After resting briefly, the scouts and guerrillas headed to the village of Plateros for a closer look at the Cabanatuan camp. Working in small teams, they scouted the camp's defenses and noticed fewer than 200 soldiers guarding it. However, a Japanese division that marched in the vicinity of the camp posed a significant threat to the entire operation. After arriving at Balancari, Mucci learned about this Japanese division and decided to postpone the raid for 24 hours to let the enemy division move past. This postponement allowed the scouts to gather more information about the camp. Lieutenant Nellist and his scouts disguised themselves as local villagers in order to come closer to the camp. With the help of guerrillas, they sketched the entire camp, located strategic points within it, and identified guard routines. At 3 a.m. on January 30th, the scouts and guerrillas reported back to Mucci and Prince, who could finalize the plan. Rangers would launch the attack as scheduled, breaking through the main gate. After eliminating the guards, they would quickly lead the prisoners to the safety of the nearby forest. Every prisoner had to be saved. Given the poor health of many POWs, Mucci arranged for local carts to transport those too weak to walk. To protect the mission, roadblocks were organized to prevent Japanese reinforcements from reaching the camp. Captain Pahota's guerrillas positioned themselves south of a critical bridge, setting mines to block Japanese troops moving along the road. Meanwhile, Captain Josen's guerrillas, bolstered by a Ranger bazooka team, guarded the southern approach to the camp to intercept any reinforcements. As the clock neared 1945 hours January 30th, the raiding force crossed their starting line south of the Pampanga River, moving cautiously through tall grass toward the POW camp. The command group positioned themselves on a rise 700 yards from the gate, observing that only one guard remained in the watchtower. The rest seemed to be at supper. Right on time, a P-61 Black Widow night fighter flew over, capturing the attention of guards and POWs alike. The unusual plane, with hard to get and a painted blonde on its side, circled above, engines sputtering to keep all eyes on it. Its pilot, Captain Schreiber, performed stunts to draw attention, letting the Rangers sneak into their final positions. At 1945 hours, the 2nd Platoon from the Fox Company opened fire, eliminating the guards near the southern part of the camp and the lone sentry in the watchtower. Staff Sergeant Millicon's team destroyed a guard pillbox with a bazooka and rifle grenades, allowing Lieutenant O'Connell's platoon to breach the main gate. As the Rangers entered, they targeted Japanese soldiers running out of their quarters. A group of soldiers destroyed tanks and trucks in the yard before the Japanese could set them in motion. With the wire barriers cut, the Charlie Company's 2nd Platoon entered the POW compound, quickly taking down guards and directing prisoners towards the gate. Overwhelmed and disoriented, the POWs hesitated, unsure if the attack was real or a Japanese trick. The Rangers had to force them out of their huts. As the POWs rushed towards the gate, a group of Japanese soldiers opened mortar fire, wounding several Rangers and scouts before they were eliminated. In around 30 minutes, the entire camp was swept of enemy presence and all prisoners gathered for evacuation. Despite the injuries, the Rangers regrouped and escorted the freed POWs to the waiting carts near the Pampanga River. Many prisoners, weak from years of mistreatment, struggled to move, so Rangers gave them their boots to help them walk. Those who were overly weak were carried by Rangers. An elderly prisoner, determined to walk on his own, proudly remarked that he had survived the Bataan death march and could manage his escape. As the rescued POWs crossed the Pampanga River, Pahota and Josen's guerrilla forces engaged the Japanese units attempting to reach the camp. Using landmines and ambush tactics, Pahota's men held off the advancing enemy. Captain Schreiber returned in his Black Widow, strafing the Japanese positions with machine guns. The combined fire from the guerrillas and the P-61 killed or wounded over 300 Japanese troops and destroyed several tanks and trucks before beginning their own retreat. Once safely across Pampanga, the POWs and rescuers met friendly locals who offered them food and water. The group rested, gathered their strength, and organized before moving toward friendly lines. The combined forces of Rangers, Scouts, guerrillas, and local villagers had successfully executed a daring rescue, overcoming the odds to free the prisoners. The success of the raid on Cabanatuan resonated through American troops in the Philippines and beyond. It was indeed one of the most daring missions conducted in the entire war. All prisoners except 2 who died were freed. The Rangers suffered only 2 killed and 4 wounded, while the guerrillas had 20 wounded fighters. After the raid, the battalion moved to San Fernando, 40 miles north of Manila, where they established their new base. Lieutenant Colonel Mucci was promoted to colonel and transferred to the 6th Division, where he became a regimental commander. The command of the 6th Ranger Battalion was taken by Major Robert Woody Garrett. Throughout the rest of the Philippines operation, the battalion operated as individual companies, taking on missions, running patrols, and destroying enemy positions across the region. In May 1945, the Rangers were assigned to their last mission. The 6th Army formed a task force for an operation at Apari, a town on Luzon's northern tip. The task force aimed to take Apari, secure its airfield, and take control of the main north-south road to split Japanese forces. The Army requested a Ranger Company to lead the assault. On June 1st, Baker Company dug in west of the river, awaiting the attack after artillery and torpedo boats finished bombing Apari. On June 21st, Baker Company crossed the river, secured Apari, took the airfield, and met up with the 37th Division advancing north. The Philippines invasion was over for the 6th Ranger Battalion. As the Rangers prepared for the invasion of Japan, they received the news of the atomic bombs dropped, ending the war in the Pacific. The Rangers did go to Japan, where they served as part of the occupation forces, but only for a brief period. The 6th Ranger Battalion was deactivated December 30th, 1945. Its members were sent home or reassigned to other units. Although their unique unit no longer existed, in their hearts, these brave men remained Rangers for the rest of their lives. Heroes of Cabanatuan and the bravest men to serve in the Pacific theater of war.